In the remnants of Ogden, Utah, now known as New Canaan, a town inhabited predominantly by Mormons, a child was born. That boy was Joshua Graham. Joshua was a child genius who easily understood and interpreted languages like it was second nature. By the time he was a young man, he was already fluent in several languages, so it was only natural that those above him made him a missionary and gave him his sacred duty to go out into the wasteland and spread the good word, translating it for those who otherwise wouldn't understand. We don't know how many years he did this for, but we do know he was away at the time when the followers of the apocalypse arrived in New Canaan. Two men named Bill Calhoun and Edward Sallow. These followers were looking for someone to join them on their expedition into the Grand Canyon, to help them in their task of learning the dialects of the tribes that called the canyon home. Naturally, Joshua was chosen and was soon heading for Arizona, following the long 15 and 89 south towards the Grand Canyon, where he met the followers of the apocalypse. Around 2247, the group descended into the canyon and came across their first tribe, the Blackfoots. Joshua's reputation preceded him, and in the beginning the tribe was friendly, although their hospitality didn't last long, as Joshua may have made a translation error that led to the Blackfoots holding them for ransom. While this doesn't sound so bad, and I'm sure the New Canaanites would have happily paid to have Joshua back, the opportunity to do so was unlikely, as the Blackfoots were expected to be killed off by warring tribes, and his life, along with the lives of the followers, were now tied together, so if the Blackfoots died, they all died. Not wanting to leave their lives up to fate, Edward Sallow took charge, and despite objections from Bill Calhoun, taught the Blackfoots how to fight. Joshua helped Sallow translate, and together they transformed the small band of tribals into a deadly war party. In time, all tribes within the Grand Canyon were conquered by the Blackfoots, who assimilated the other tribes, and the Legion was born, with Sallow acting as Kaiser and Joshua serving as the second in command as the Malpais Legate. For 30 years, Joshua helped Kaiser conquer the tribes of Arizona, Utah, Colorado, and New Mexico, slowly losing himself along the way. And while he was no strategist, he was brutal, committing atrocities that made him feared by friends and foes alike. There's no denying it, Joshua was a dangerous adversary that countless tribes failed to kill. Even the NCR Rangers and 1st Recon were unable to end the Malpais Legate, but there was someone who came close. After Ulysses, an emissary of the Legion, discovered Hoover Dam, Kaiser became obsessed with taking it from the NCR and using it to control the region, with New Vegas becoming his Rome. Once Kaiser felt his legion was strong enough, Joshua was called to battle. His determination and might that had gotten him this far had led to him underestimating the enemy. He deployed the legionaries in the very same way he always had, in a direct attack, but for once he wasn't facing tribals, he was facing the NCR, a nation with a vast population, with their own laws, economy, currency, and military that controlled California. It was unlike anything he had ever faced, and Hanlon, chief of the NCR Rangers, had studied the Legion and anticipated their first move, which allowed him to draw them into a deadly trap. In big battles, legionaries are deployed in 3 waves, with recruits at the front, prime legionaries in the middle, and veteran legionaries at the back. Enemies tire themselves out dealing with the first 2 waves, and if the enemy is still standing, the veterans finish them off. Now, Kaiser can adapt to a changing battlefield, and when required he can run any combination of legionaries and still maintain order. As I previously mentioned, Joshua is no strategist, so after first contact, when General Oliver ordered his troops to retreat to the middle of the dam, Joshua followed, sending all legionaries after them, assuming they had overpowered the enemy and now had them on the run. But once they were in, they were stuck. Oliver's troops dug in and wouldn't let the Legion pass. Then the Rangers and 1st Recon sharpshooters, who were strategically placed along the western ridge, started to pick off the veteran legionaries at the back. In a panic state, Joshua ordered the veterans to push through the first 2 waves to the front and rush the western ridge, which caused total chaos among the recruits who weren't trained for this, and thanks to the ridge which provided excellent cover, the enemy slipped out of sight. By the time the veterans made it to the ridge, the enemy had retreated to Boulder City, and thinking they were finally on the run, they pursued them into the town. But what Joshua hadn't realized was that the entire town had been rigged with C4 and dynamite, and the enemy had escaped. Before they had the chance to retreat, the entire town was engulfed in flames, along with countless legionaries. Those that survived the blast were disoriented and in no shape to mount a defense. Joshua called all remaining legionaries to regroup, but the battle was already lost. The Malpais legate returned to Caesar in shame, and he knew that this man, his friend who he had served for 30 years, who he had fought side by side with and risked his life for every time he stepped on the battlefield, would punish him for his failure. For failing to capture Hoover Dam, Joshua was taken to the Grand Canyon where they had met all those years ago and was sentenced to death, covered in pitch, set on fire, and thrown into the canyon where he should have died.
I survived because the fire inside burned brighter than the fire around me. I fell down into that dark chasm. The flame burned on and on.
He awoke sometime later in excruciating pain, his body crudely barbecued and blistered. Eventually, the fallen legate managed to crawl out of the northern edge of the Grand Canyon, where he began the long walk home to New Canaan. During the 3 months it would take him to walk home, he would reflect on the man he had become. The 3 decades of warfare had slowly turned him into a monster. He had betrayed everything he held dear in service to Caesar, caught up in the man's ruthless nomadic army of conquered tribes. Small compromises steadily became more sinister and brutal, rationalizing his atrocities as necessary actions that needed to be done for the greater good. But when the man he followed threw him away, abandoning him, he was forced to review his past discretions, and upon reflection, he worried his family would be unable to forgive him. But upon reaching his home, he was welcomed with open arms. It was as if the prodigal son had returned, and the 30 years of separation, atrocities, and shame were irrelevant to his family, who deeply cared for him and were only happy to have him home. Quickly, Joshua discovered that he was immune to modern medicine. Stimpaks could heal him, but it did nothing for the endless pain he was cursed to endure. Every morning he was forced to cover his burned and twisted skin with clean bandages to prevent infection, the pain of which was like being burned all over again, but in his words, it was better to be clean than comfortable. In time, rumors began to spread of a burned man that stalked the wastelands. Eventually, these rumors reached the ears of Caesar, who forbade legionaries from speaking Joshua's true name, threatening those who did with death, which only fueled the rumors and made them more believable. Caesar soon had frumentari scouring the wasteland in search of the burned man. Wherever he was, his agents would find him and destroy him. Now, Joshua is well aware of Caesar's hatred towards him, knowing the many frumentari and assassins that happened to cross his path were intentionally sent to kill him, which they could never do. But even with the threat of death looming over him, he forgave Caesar, in keeping with the idea that you hate the sin but love the sinner. By 2281, Joshua's past eventually caught up with him, when the Whitelegs, a tribe trained by Ulysses, attacked New Canaan with the aim of killing Joshua, burning the town to the ground and slaughtering all who weren't quick enough to escape. As usual, Joshua avoided death, as he was away at the time. Another Mormon missionary managed to flee into Zion Canyon, where Joshua also sought refuge. But these 2 missionaries had opposing views on what to do, and would go their separate ways. Daniel to the sorrows the descendants of the children Randall Clark had watched over many years prior, and Joshua to the dead horses, a tribe he had commanded back when he was the Malpais legate before he failed the legion and faced Caesar's wrath. The dead horses, without Joshua, were left alone, but with their new hunting skills which he had taught them, they started raiding and attacking rival tribes. That was until they faced a foe they couldn't destroy and were forced from their home all the way to Zion. They had lost much on their journey, but not the reverence they held for the Malpais legate. So when the man himself, now bandaged from head to toe, approached them asking for their help, they were more than happy to grant him the title of war chief. But this time, Joshua led them away from Caesar, explaining what would have happened to them had the legion not lost at Hoover Dam. Instead, he wants them to fight for their home, as he wants nothing more than to bring God's justice to those who would bring harm to others. Clearly, his desire for vengeance on the Whitelegs, those who butchered his people, burns within him, a fire endlessly fueled by his desire for redemption. So when it came time to face the Whitelegs, Joshua wanted the dead horses and the Sorrows to fight for their homes. Daniel instead wanted them to run away to safety, despite what Randall Clark would have wanted them to do. To be kind, but if someone came along and tried to hurt them, then to strike back with righteous anger. In the end, the choice is yours. Nevertheless, Joshua will fight the Whitelegs, but what happens after that is ambiguous. His luck, at long last, may have finally run out. Or he might have gone on to rally the two tribes, along with the new Canaanites, becoming a shadow of Kaiser, ruthlessly killing all who oppose him, with the legends of the burned man growing into something even more depraved and terrifying. Personally, I like to think that Joshua defended Zion and exterminated the Whitelegs, allowing the dead horses to return to their home at Dead Horse Point, but spared their war chief salt upon wounds, showing the Sorrows that retribution could be tempered by mercy, and through doing so, changed himself for the better.
The threat of the Whitelegs ended. Joshua Graham helped the Sorrows and dead horses tend to their fallen comrades and secure Zion. The courier's words had stayed Joshua's wrath in his darkest hour, and in sparing salt upon wounds, he was changed. While he continued to advocate militant opposition to the enemies of New Canaan, he sometimes showed quarter to those who crossed his family. Eventually, this new spirit would diminish the myth of the burned man in distant lands, a small price for the peace it brought to Joshua Graham.
Be sure to show your support by liking the video and subscribing if you haven't already for more Fallout content. If there's anything you would like to see in a later video, leave a comment and I'll see what I can do. With that said, thank you as always for watching, and I'll see you in the next adventure.